Hey, friends, welcome to Miss V, the Storyteller podcast. You guys know that I bring you the best. Let me tell you, this is my twin. We have so much in common. We have our own podcast, and I'm telling you, this lady is so me. We are just sisters from another mister, or however they say that saying. And I am so honored and so thrilled to have Neena Perez here. I was on her show, and before we even aired, we were just talking and laughing, and we just did the same thing again because we are like kindred sisters. And I am so happy and I'm so blessed to have her on the show. So, Neena, I want you to tell my listeners a little bit about yourself. I would love to brag on you, but I want you to brag on yourself because you are an amazing woman.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad I'm here. When you were on my podcast, we had so much fun. And then you're like, you want to be on my podcast? I'm like, yes, I get more time with Miss V. Heck
Yes.
yeah. So I'm a transformational life coach. I'm Neena Perez, and I also have a podcast called Straight Talk, No Sugar Added. And what I do is I have amazing people like yourself come on and tell their stories, like what they've been through, how they've overcome, and how they're inspiring others. So what I do in my coaching business is I empower self-led, heart-centered women to transcend their shame and unwanted behaviors in their life so that they can start to create, that life and that business that they want, right? Learning who they truly, truly are, who God made them to be. And a lot of times as we're growing up, shame has a lot to do with
Mm.
casts a big shadow over our lives and over our destiny. And so I help women kind of see who they really are.
Don't you love that? Don't you love that? And she's just like me because I help people to find their voices and their
Yeah.
story. And we're all about helping women and helping people to be the best people that they can possibly be. And we all need help in different areas of our
Hmm.
lives. And we're just grateful that God chose us to be a vessel to help other people. So, Neena, I know you have a story. I know because, again, we are kindred spirits. We are like twin sisters.
For real.
So I know you have a story. So please share your story. Who is Neena Perez? What made her the amazing person she is today?
Let me tell you, I know that a lot of it, I'm going to attribute everything to God, right? That's who made me the amazing person I am today. But it didn't come with a lot of, without a lot of trauma. And so I wrote my book, autobiography. It's called "Hit Me with Your Best Shot: How I Overcame a Hard Hitting Life." And it's my story of, well, shame and abuse and teen pregnancy, domestic violence, poverty, almost being murdered, being raped, like all of these things in my life that have caused a lot of trauma in my life and made me feel like I had no worth. And so, but God, right?
Hmm.
He stepped into my life and completely flipped my life around. I grew up as a Catholic. And so my grandmother, would always make sure that we went to church, but I didn't have a relationship with God. And throughout, me growing up and trying to find some spirituality, if you will, I had gotten into a Spanish religion, or it's kind of an Afro-Spanish religion. It's called Santeria, which is like almost like I guess magic or black magic or Wicca. I don't know what
Hmm.
they call it now, but I got into that, which is praying through saints, and you pray through saints so they can pray to God, like that kind of thing. And so my story has a lot of facets, right? Because I had a pregnant at 14. I had a child at
Hmm.
15 years old. So I became a mom very early before even I hit high school. And I had to raise a child. And in that relationship, his father was extremely, extremely abusive. He's older than I. And he nearly murdered me, put a gun to my head, pulled the trigger. And because of God, the safety got jammed on the gun, and I'm sitting here today.
God.
Yeah, God is something. I didn't, at the time, I don't know if I attribute it to God or just luck or whatever it was, because I found a true relationship with God a little later in my life.
Hmm.
But I know now that every experience that I've been through, being molested by my stepfather, being rejected by my biological father, the teen pregnancy, the being homeless, living in shelters, like all that kind of stuff in my life, I realize now that it's built this superwoman,
Yes.
that I never knew I would become, and so that's why I take like everything I've been through, my whole story, and there's a lot to it, and I use that to impact others' lives because I'm literally building the woman I wish I had,
Yes.
and a woman that is strong, but knows that my strength comes from God, right? God is everything to me. So
Yes.
I know that he, guides me, he leads me, he does everything for me. And so this business that I'm building, which is my transformational coaching, is with God in it. You know what I'm saying? So I'm really helping women to know who they are, what that worth is, and that's a gift from God as well. When you can see someone in the midst of their, trauma, in the midst of their tears, in the midst of whatever they're going through, and you say, "Wow, I see so much greatness in that."
Yes.
Yeah. That's a little bit of my
Yes.
story.
Yeah. Listen, that's a lot. I thought that I went through a lot, but I have not apparently gone through a lot.
Stop it.
But for me, it was a
Right.
lot. And it was a couple of things that you said that when I was growing up, we were raised in the church and we went to church with my grandmother. My parents would send us to church. And, so I was raised in the church, but as you say, I didn't really have a relationship with
Right.
God. I sang in the choir because that's what you're supposed to do, the
Right.
youth choir, the junior choir. And then when I became a teenager, there was a little gap where I really didn't go to church as much, but then my godmother came along and I started to go to church again with her. And that's when I became a Christian. But before that happened, those were the years where I didn't really have my voice. And
Mm,
God put people in my life. At the time, I did not know. I wasn't aware that it was because it was so hard on me. And there was three specific times that I wanted to take my life
yeah.
because I was like, I can't live like this anymore. If this is the life that I'm supposed to live, I can't. But God kept putting the right people in my life. He kept dropping them in. And then that person it was almost like I look at it as this, he kept sending angels
Yeah.
for to meet whatever that need was. And when that assignment was gone for that angel went somewhere else. And I give you the perfect example. And it's one of my stories on my podcast. I was working and at on the base at the golf course. And we had to walk because my mom and dad had separated. So my mom, um, she had to go to work, so we didn't have a car. So me and my brother, we had to walk to work. So my cousin, her mom said, "I'll give you all rides to work because we were all working on the base. Y'all just have to give me gas money." And we was like, "Okay, fine." So that's what we did. So we got rides to work, but coming home was different because she got
Mm.
off at a different time. So one day I was just so tired and it wasn't around the corner. Um, it was a long,
Oh,
long
I'm
walk.
sure, especially if you had to get a ride to get there to begin with.
Yes, 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 absolutely. So I was so tired this day and I was so angry, because I couldn't get off early enough to run up to where she was working to catch a ride with her home. So I
Right.
just had to walk and I was walking and I was just so angry and I was so mad. And God knew I was so tired because someone big was coming to the base and he wanted to play golf. So they wanted the entire um, place clean from top to bottom. They wanted new stock put out in the pro shop. They wanted the locker rooms clean, and they had, everybody's running around. So I was exhausted, and I'm
Yeah.
walking, and there was this lady that came up. I'll never forget. She had a red Trans Am. She ran up and she was shifting gears, just killing the car. And she stopped and she said, do you want to ride?" And I'm looking at her and I'm like, you're not supposed to get in the car with strangers, but it's a
Right.
woman. She should be safe. And she was an older lady. And I'm like, she should be safe. So I got in the car and she started driving and we was because she didn't know how to drive a stick. So I asked her, we kept bucking and bucking, and I was like, she was scraping gears. It was just, I was so scared. And she said, where do you live? And I said, well, from here is not too far, because I had walked almost halfway. And I said, is this your new car? And she said, no, it's my husband's car. And I said, oh. And she said, I got mad at him because I wanted to go out for a drive. He wouldn't take me. So I took his keys and now I'm driving. So she has stolen her husband Trans Am. I can only imagine how angry he was because it was
Yes.
spotless. You know how men are about their cars. And so she's scraping the gears, but we get where we needed to go. And I said, listen, you can just stop me off at the front of the neighborhood and I will walk, because I was so terrified because of the way she was driving. And as I was walking, I thought to myself, she was an angel that God sent me. And I call her an angel in training. And
Oh,
that's exactly what I call her, an angel in training, because I felt like she was sent from heaven, put in this car that she did not know how to drive,
right,
just
right,
to pick me up and get me home
right. At
safely,
that
at
particular
that
time.
particular
Yeah,
time. So I call her an angel in training. And I look back at my life during that very difficult time, and I feel like God just sent people
yeah,
to just help me
yeah,
over it. Even the
yeah,
first time I wanted to take my life, my sister, he sent her home, and she started yelling at me to keep me from taking the pill. She didn't even know I was gonna do it. She just came in the house
mm,
being herself, and I completely forgot about it because I got in an argument with her.
right,
So I completely forgot about it. So what I'm saying in essence is that I believe just God puts people in our life
yeah,
to help us through difficult times, because he knows the end results. He knows, okay, I've chosen her. He
yeah,
chose you, and he said they're going to be so inspirational to help other people because
yeah,
of everything that they went through. So once you come out of certain things, did you ever go back and say, I learned a lesson from this? Because
yeah.
I will always try to find a lesson in it, primarily so I won't have to go through it again. Because
Yeah.
sometimes you have to
Yes,
go
yes,
through
yes,
things over
yes,
and over again. And like, wait a minute,
yes.
Lord, 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 wait a minute. One and done. What am I supposed to learn? So I won't
Right.
have to do it.
That's so
So what
funny.
were
That's
some of the,
exactly what I do. It's exactly what I do because I'm like, I don't need to learn this lesson again. Nope, no, thank
like,
you.
whatever,
Uh,
Lord?
you know, every situation has a lesson learned. Now, I will say that at the time, like, through my teens and through my 20s, I didn't stop to focus on the lesson. I was trying to survive,
Right.
so survival was the key, and it wasn't really self awareness. It wasn't until I got into my 30s or so that I finally started to work on Neena. Like started going back to college in my 30s, or not back to it, started for the first time going to college in my 30s. I never thought it was really was I good enough? Was I smart enough? You're having a kid and your teens, graduating by the skin of your teeth from high school because you have to
Mm-hmm.
take care of a kid, work 2 jobs, all that stuff, right? Then I had a marriage that was failed. I left the abuser and I got married to a narcissist, which
Wow.
that's what happens, right? You don't if you don't heal, you attract people
Yes.
to you. You have to heal to
Yes.
see a different situation, a different outcome. So I've learned a lot of things, and I'll tell you, all those lessons that have happened to me, everything that's happened from being rejected to being molested by my stepfather to being abused to all of it, everyone taught me a lesson. And a lot of the lessons were, I'm resilient, I am built to last. you
Yes.
know I am really, really strong. It's increased my faith, even while I was, homeless and we lost everything, with my current husband, who I'm with for 25 years. We had lost everything in 2008, our home, our cars, everything. I was in the middle of college at the time, so I had no real work, stuff like that. But even in that, I knew God had my back. I knew he did. And so every lesson, and I always think about, that little cliche that if God got you to it, he'll get you through it,
Through it.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything is a lesson. I do the same thing. I always say, you know what, God, what's the lesson here? Oh, okay. I'm strong. I'm resilient. The story is not for me. The story is for others.
Yes.
It's to increase. Oh, I'm actually smarter than I thought I was, stronger than I thought I was, more resilient than I thought I was. And I learn a lot. I learn a lot. Flags about, when I see a red flag in someone, nope, not the person I want to be
Oh,
around.
yes.
Already learned that flag, that the narcissistic behavior or the abuse in language or the way you're going to speak to me, like all of that kind of stuff is an immediate no. And I realized that no is a complete sentence. So
Absolutely.
when I
Period.
say no, I don't exactly, that's exactly right. I say no and I literally don't explain myself. I don't have to, you know, and I won't. And the reason I don't is because I, like you, Miss V, in a different way. I found my voice in a different way, right? I found
Mm-hmm.
my voice in, I mean, I always was a big talker, things like that, but I found my voice in that I'm worth it. I have worth,
Yes.
I have value, and I won't allow people to abuse that. I have boundaries now. I have ways to protect myself from outside, influences and stuff like that. I have a mission. I have a clear scope of where I'm going, but I'm flexible. I let God pull me and push me wherever He'd like. And so every lesson in life is to give you value, to show you something more, but it's not for you. Every story is not for you. Your story is not for you. You're listen to me,
Oh,
people. Listen to me, people.
oh, I
You have
love her.
stories.
I
You have
love her.
stories in your life, many stories that you should not be ashamed of. I always say that there's two different types of shame, Miss V. There's the shame of you did something wrong, you should be ashamed. That's how God corrects your path. If you did something wrong, be ashamed of it so you can turn from it. That's what it's there for, not to keep you a prisoner. The second shame is toxic. It's when somebody does something to you and you have taken it on as if it's yours.
Yours.
My
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like my stepfather molesting me as a child, I was super ashamed of that for so many years until I realized he should be the one that's ashamed, not me. And I put that right back on him. Go ahead, you could take that. I put it at God's feet. I forgave. I kept it moving. Right. So, but why did we go through all that? Why do we do, like, I used to always question God, why? Until I realized when I open my mouth, when I write my book, when I open the podcast, when I share my story, another woman is set free.
Whew, love
Another
it.
woman is set free from that bondage. Why in the world would I not speak? So it's just like you, Miss V, like you found your voice. You open up a podcast, you're helping people write their stories. You're helping them create what their life means. Our life is not for us to go through all these things and then die. It's not what it's about.
I am so glad you said that because people feel like it's their life is for themselves and it's
Mm-hmm.
not.
Mm-hmm.
And remind me to circle back to the flag thing because God gave me this
Mm-hmm.
great revelation just the other day about the flags. But I want to go back to one of my favorite shows to watch on TV is called Finding Your Roots. I love that show. It's a show where the host he has celebrities to come on and then he goes back in history and tells them about their ancestors, where they
Oh,
come
nice.
from and all that. I love the show. And one of the things that I love about the show is it shows, especially people of color, it shows us how resilient
Yeah.
our ancestors were and how strong and how much they went through to become, for us to become who we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And their stories help. I mean, I watch the stars and they're crying and they're like, I can't believe this and all that. And they're hearing it for the first time. But what it's doing to them is helping them to understand even more who they are
Mm-hmm.
because of their past, because of their ancestors. And it helps to some people, they change the way that they think.
Mm-hmm.
No, it changed the way. But then they go out in essence, and then they go out into the world because now they're a different person because they know where
Right.
they come
Right.
from. And now they go out into the world and they share it. And their light is shining a little bit brighter because they understand even more where they come from. And I
Right.
love doing that because I look at my life. And although it's painful sometimes, I look at it, but it was all for a reason. And God
Mm-hmm.
allowed it to
Mm-hmm.
happen for a reason, so that not only am I helping people, but I can feel what they felt because I felt it, because I've been
Right.
through it. I know
Right. Right.
exactly how you feel.
Right.
So I can help you.
Right.
And like, you look at somebody and you can, by their expression on their face, I am so sure you can look at them and say, I know that look.
Mm-hmm.
I had
Mm-hmm.
that look. Or I know that excuse because I've made that
Oh
excuse.
yeah. Oh
And one
yeah.
of the things you said about the flags, I was talking to someone the other day, and she was sharing some things with me, and I said, that was a flag. Did you see the flag? And she was like, yes, that was a flag. And as I was driving home, I thought about it, and God was like, when you see a flag, do you make an excuse for the flag when you
Mm.
see it? Or do you make a decision? Is this a flag I can live with?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we need to do with flags, because if you make an excuse for a flag, that's the worst thing that you could ever do. When you see a flag, no matter where it's in a
Yeah.
relationship, on a job, anywhere, when that flag is going like this,
Exactly.
waving, you need to like, oh no, that's just the way he is. No, that is
Mm-hmm.
a flag. And you need to look
Mm-hmm.
at that flag and say, is this something I can live with? Is this something I can deal with? Is this something
Yeah.
that can be a part
Yeah.
of my life? And if the answer is no, that flag needs to get to stepping and going.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm,
I'm like,
yeah.
God,
Yeah.
thank you so much for showing me a flag in a different way, because most women or most people, when you talk about flags, they think about relationships, but it's not just relationships. It's in your entire
Yeah.
life. There are flags flying all over your whole life.
Right. That's right. That's right. Especially like, not even just a relationship, between your significant other, but friendships, work relationships, bosses, co-workers, all of those things can give you flags that you need to be careful with. To me, flags belong in a cemetery, right? The flags belong in a cemetery. They don't belong near me. Don't wave it over there, So I it's funny because even though I've gone through a lot in my life and I've overcome a lot of things in my life, there's still things to overcome.
Of
There's times where
course.
you'll see a flag and you're like, well, maybe they're just you
Make an
know
excuse.
exactly. And I'm not huge on excuses. I don't do them really well. And it's because all my life, even though I've had these really big walls and things that I have to climb in my life and go through, I did it anyway. I have a saying where I just do it afraid. I do it anyway. I do it afraid. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So even if I'm afraid of that, okay, prepare yourself, Neen. You're afraid of it. Let's do it. That's
Wow.
just the way I am, and I think it's because of survival, right? Survival of the fittest. You had to survive. And so you had to, when I was being abused, I had to survive. I had to
Mm.
figure out ways not to be murdered. I had to figure out ways for this man not to throw me down a flight of stairs or, stab me or whatever it was, so you learn survival skills, in that way, unfortunately, but it's true. I'm so glad I did. I am so glad I went through
Yes.
all of it. I am proud of who I am. And I want anybody who's listening to be proud of every single stage they have been through in their life. You don't have anything to be ashamed of. You don't have to look at the past and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so ashamed. Yes, there's things we've done that we are not proud of. I get it. But
Mm-hmm.
also know that you've overcome that. It's the past. That's why it's called the past. And
Absolutely.
look at it, be accepting of it and say, you know what? Yes, I did that. That hurt. It was bad. I shouldn't have done it, but I did. Accept it, feel it, keep it moving. It is
Keep it
time
moving.
to transcend that feeling. So that's why I work a lot in shame, because shame stopped me from so many things in life.
Yes.
So
And
many.
we as
And
women,
unforgiveness too.
yeah, we as women, we do feel ashamed about a lot of things,
Yeah.
especially if you're a parent or
Mm-hmm.
you're a single parent or something like that. There's a
So
lot of
true.
shame, because I know my mom, sometimes I watched her, and now that I'm an adult, when I go back on that moment or that experience or that thought, I'm like, oh my God, she was ashamed. That's why she did that. Or that's why she act that way, because she was
Right.
ashamed. And we carry shame around.
Oh
But
yeah.
what I want to know from you is, you know, when you came out of all of these things and God began to turn things around for you,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when you look back at it, when you looked up at the Lord, when was the moment you knew that God said, okay, this is what you were? born to do? When was your moment? For
Mm,
me, my moment was I was at a prophetic roundtable, and I had been writing, and God had at nighttime, I just kept having all these dreams, and these dreams started to turn into stories that started to turn into books. So I'm thinking that God wanted me to write all these books because I had like 5 books. I've written one, the other one is halfway, well, almost completed. So I have like these 5 books. I'm like, okay, God, is that, this is what I'm supposed to do. And then I was there and it was prophesied to me. She was like, God wants you to be a storyteller. I'm looking around like, who he want what to do? Who? Somebody who don't
right,
talk, he don't want, I can
right,
write the story, but you want me
right,
to stand up and tell a story. And from that's when, and I prayed about it, and I was like, oh, that's why the stories, because he was developing that spirit of, that storytelling in me, because I've always shared stories in the past with my
right,
kids. When I taught school, I would make up stories all the time. And because I was an introvert and so quiet, I would make up stories about people. I made up stories about me laying them out when they mistreated me. I
right,
would go in my
right.
head. I was like, I would like Breaking
I
Bad
love that.
in my head because I was so
Right,
afraid to talk. So all of
right,
that was developing my gift of storytelling. And then with God, the next day, God was like, I want you to start a podcast and I want you to share all your personal stories. I'm like, are you sure you have the right daughter? Did you
right.
like turn right? You were supposed to turn
That's
left,
like Moses. Come on, God, I don't talk. Moses did the
right?
same
And
thing.
so, but when that was done to me, I didn't fight it. At first I was a little bit scared and I had some doubt, but then things just started to unravel and I was like, okay, this is really what God wants me to do. So did you have a moment when you said, okay, I've
Mm.
been through all of that and God said, okay, Neena, this is what I want you to do?
It's interesting. Yes, in many different ways, but I'll remember the very first day he caught my attention. I had gotten, I had now became a Christian. I was really into the Lord, into the word, reading the word every day. I even went to leadership school for biblical studies for like a year and a half. Like I really just love God. And I remember I used to work in the medical office and, I was doing my Bible study. So I had my Bible open. It was lunch. People always had comments about, oh, here she go again, wear a Bible, blah, blah, blah,
Mhm.
whatever. So I was reading the Bible study. And I'm like, wow, that was really good. I went to close the Bible. And when I looked up, Miss V, the room had expanded like supernaturally. And I saw thousands of women, just like thousands of women. It was a split second, but enough to impact me, because I
Yes.
did it and I looked up, I was like, I was like, oh, no, 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 no. And I just zipped up my Bible study and off I went. I was like, no, 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 we're not doing that. We're not doing that because speaking in front of people is just not my thing. It
Right.
wasn't what I do, right? So, but that was like the first time I saw that he was doing small glimpses to get my attention, and he did that more than once, right? Now, the way Jesus came into my life and got my attention for real, was when I was praying to one of the saints. I had 2 candles. One was black because it was to the saint, and one was with I don't know if you ever saw those candles in the supermarket with like Jesus and he has the
Mhm.
heart
With
or
the
whatever.
cross.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was lighting the candle and I turned around, I looked at Jesus' candle and I'm like, am I doing something wrong? Because I had already been in this religion like 3 or 4 years. And I'm like, am I doing something wrong? Like something happened. It was almost like a veil fell off my eyes. And all of a sudden I can see what's happening and I didn't like it. So I fell on the ground. I was crying. And to make a long story short, the next day from that, my house burned down. Right.
Oh my.
The house, I never lit the candle to the saint. So the first reaction from the people that taught me the religion was saying, well, you never lit the candle to the saint. They're angry with you, whatever. But I knew it was God. I knew it was God.
Mhm.
And I'm like, God, if this ain't funny. I mean, I know I asked you if you're real, but this ain't funny, you
Right.
know? Like but I knew something was different in me, right? So I remember that day I called the insurance company. It was Allstate. I called Allstate and I said, hey, can you please, my house burned down. We need the money, blah, blah, blah. I have no money in the bank, whatever. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. Your account was canceled like 6 months ago. You don't have insurance. I was like, excuse me? I started crying. They're like, I'm sorry, we're looking at your insurance right now. Your policy is not active. We're so sorry. So here I am, no money, no food, no nothing. And I have 2 kids. I have a boyfriend who's not my husband. And I'm sitting there and I'm crying. Miss V, I grabbed the paper in my hand. I'll never forget this because it impacts me every time I say it. But I had the insurance paper in my hand and I grappled with it and I said, Lord, I don't know if you are real, but if you are real and you help us out of this situation and you show me you're real, I will follow you all the rest of my days. I will
Oh,
follow
that's
you. I
right.
promise you. I cannot live like this. I was crying and everything. Girl, the next day, I opened the door. There is an Allstate agent. I said,
What?
I said, can I help you? He's like, yes. I forgot his name. My husband remembers his name. He said, I'm from Allstate. I said, okay. He said, I couldn't sleep all night. So I decided to relook at your insurance policy. And we were so wrong. That was an old insurance policy. You're fully
Oh,
covered.
oh my God. Look at God. Don't you love how God
Look at
works?
God. Look at
Yes.
God. I looked at my husband. I said, Jesus is real. Jesus is real. Like, I knew that I knew at that moment my life would never be the same. I threw away all of the statues. I threw away all of those candles, all of that. And God burnt the house down on purpose, Miss V, because
Yes.
he moved me out of New York back into Connecticut, where I lost contact with all of those religious folks from that religion. All the contacts were gone because back then, yeah, you had them on your phone, but it wasn't the same. As soon as you switched your phone, you lost the numbers. I lost numbers, emails. I have not even seen one of those people in over 25 years. Okay.
Wow.
Because when Jesus wants you and he wants to
Yes.
strip you down, he will do
Yes.
so at any
Yes.
means necessary. And I am so grateful that he had decided to snatch me out of a religion that was about to suck me in,
Look at
and he is
God.
so good. He is so good. And
Listen,
not
let me,
even a week. I'm sorry. Let me just finish this
no,
one
no,
little
go
thing.
ahead.
Not even a week later, I called my aunt and I'm like, I need to find a Christian church, not Catholic, Christian. I need a Christian church. She's like, okay. She takes me to this church. We're sitting there. I'm like, Lord, this praise and worship is like 3 hours. Why does praise and worship so long? Because I never
What
been in a
church?
church like that. Although I ended up becoming one of the leads in the worship team, but I was like, this taking forever. The pastor's talking, stops the service in the middle of the service, says, I don't know what's going on, but God is asking me to tell you that if you have been praying to saints and you have been dealing with those kind of religions, you need to come down here right now and have me pray for you. I was like, I looked at my husband. I said, did you tell somebody? He goes, babe, I'm here with you. I don't know nobody. That's how Jesus worked in my life. That's why I can't turn my back on him. I will never turn my back on him. And like I said to him the day I grabbed that paper, I will follow you the rest of my days. I will not leave you. I will not forsake you. I will not go anywhere without you. That is God in my life.
I love this story. See, this is why you need to tell your stories because it
Yes.
touches so many people's lives. And I love that about you. And it made me, it, it brought a memory back to me. I think it was the second time that I wanted to end my life. And I was in my kitchen. And I think it was during the holidays. And it was so many things that had happened and I was done. I said, okay, that's it, God. I'm done.
Mm,
I cannot, if you're real, God, I'm telling you, I cannot do this. I
right.
can't live like this. If this is the life that you've chosen for me, I'd rather for you to take me right now. And then
Mm,
I had that second thought because in the black culture, you don't take your life because you won't go to heaven.
right.
And
Right.
that thought came to
That's
my
right. That's
head.
yeah, that's my culture too. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so
Yep.
because you kill yourself, you won't go to heaven. And I'm like, but I can't live like this. And I was sitting on the floor by the sink and I was just bawling, just crying. And I'm telling you, I literally felt the arms of God pick me up
Yes.
off the floor, hug
Yes.
me, and wipe the tears away from my face. And
I believe that.
I'm looking
Yes.
around like, what just happened? Because it
So
wasn't
good.
me.
So
It
good.
wasn't me. And God was like, I love you and I chose you. Even now, I'm telling, I get all,
Yeah. Yeah.
misty eyed, and I'm like, me, you chose me, but look at, look at, do you see? Are you sure? Cause I know me, I'm not, I'm not this, and I'm telling God that I'm not this and
Right,
all
like he's
that. And God
surprised.
was like, no, 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 no,
Like
no,
God is
no.
surprised. Girl, he
Right.
created you.
I'm telling exactly, and I'm telling him all this, but after that moment, I had one other, and it wasn't really me wanting to take my life. It was on borderline, but the thing is that the enemy was attacking me because
Yeah.
he knew that God was pushing me
Yeah.
in this direct, and I was getting really close.
Yeah.
And he was pulling like all stops to just, like, oh no, I'm gonna stop her, I'm gonna stop her, I'm gonna stop her. And God was like, no, 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 no. I chose
Right.
her. No, 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 no. But if you know it in your heart and your heart is right,
So good.
it can't
So good.
happen. Oh my God. I told you guys that she was going to be so good. But I want to talk about a couple of other things.
Okay.
Share a little bit about your podcast, and then you can share a little bit about your book, because I know
Yeah.
that that book is going to be amazing, because you've already shared some nuggets about what's in the
Yes.
book. And so I know the book itself is going to go in detail, and it's going to tell us really about the
Yeah.
experiences and how you overcame them. So you can talk a little bit about the podcast and then tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, the podcast came about because I first started it in 2018, I think, and it was a monologue. It was really just me doing kind of like stories about what God has done in my life, and like the way I've used scripture in my life, and the way it's helped me through a lot of things. And it was really good. It was really, or at least I thought it was really good. It was really good, and I decided to switch up around 2020, I think it was, or 19 or whatever it was, because I wanted it to be a monologue. I wanted to speak with people. I didn't want it to just be me and a voice, out there in the world. So it started to become a monologue, and then it started to become really inspirational. I wanted to take people's stories and say, how did you create this business? Because I know you didn't just start here. So tell me about this part. You kind of what you do, tell me
Right.
about your story. What's going on there? And that just became fun. I started meeting a lot of great people,
Mhm.
connecting, and my network got bigger. People started listening more. So I get a lot of more, a couple thousand downloads a month. Like, so it's become a really great thing. And so that's how the podcast, the Straight Talk No Sugar added, is because I'm a straight talker. I don't normally add sugar to what I say. So people love me or they hate me, right? And I'm okay with both.
Right.
Because I'm not for everybody. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I always say, if I'm not your cup of tea, put a little vodka and stir. I don't know
Ah,
what to tell you,
love it.
but that's the podcast, and I love it, and it's super fun. And then the book is really, yeah, just little, not little, but all my little stories, all stories that have happened in my life, and what I went through. I will tell you that in 2018, I was really diving into my self development journey. And so the book, I feel like I should rewrite it with the impact that it's had in my life, because I kind of just wrote the stories, but
Okay.
now I'm ready to write it in a way so when you read it, you're like, okay, got that lesson from that, because I
Yeah.
didn't write it with the lessons. I just kind of wrote what was happening chronologically.
Yeah.
But that's Hit Me With Your Best Shot, how I overcame a hard hitting life. And of course, it's a play on words because I did have a lot of hitting in my life, being abused
Yeah.
in many ways. And it's about that and my faith in God, and, some things that I went through as a mother, having abortions in my life that I hated myself for a very long time and had to ask God to forgive me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, there's a lot of things in that book. It's really heavy. People who have read it have said, oh my gosh, how does one human being go through so much? And I never saw it that way, Miss V. I just saw it as life, and I kept going. I just kept going. I'm one of those people that just keeps going. I do have a victim. Let me preface, I had a victim mentality, where I was very depressed. I had a lot of anxiety. Everything was everybody's fault. And look
Hmm.
what happened to me. And I was this victim. I refuse to be the victim. I refuse. I'm the victor, not the victim,
That's
you know?
amen.
So that's a little bit of the book and the podcast.
Well, let me tell you, you just said it, you just spoke it, because now when you write the sequel to your book, I
Yes.
think that's going to be even better. And you should write it, because when me, even as me being a writer, I started my podcast the same way that you were saying. It was all stories of personal
Mhm.
stories of things that happened to me. But what I did is at the end of each story, I shared my thoughts And then I would
Mm,
ask questions for the audience when they listen to it. And I think that is so key when
yeah.
you go through a whole lot to go back and think about, what did I learn from that? What was my takeaway from it?
Mm-hmm.
Because in your case, when somebody reads your book and then they go to volume 2 and they see how what you learned from it, if they're going through that, that is
Yeah.
going to send them into like, oh my God, this is what I need to do. Because sometimes all you need is a resource, or you need
Yeah.
like a little tweak, or somebody to just say something, and you're like, oh my God, oh my goodness, I
Yeah.
got it. And then you take
Yeah.
that action and you put those steps into it. And then the next thing you know, you're delivered because you
Right.
heard or you read how somebody else made it through. Because I know for me, listening to other people and talking to other people, I have gained so much and I've learned so
Yeah.
much.
Same.
Because there was one in between, one in particular. I was on was I a guest? I think I was a guest on a podcast, and when I went back and listened to the podcast, I was like, and it was something that I needed. That
That's so
podcast, I was
awesome.
on it, but it was
Right.
something that I needed. And God was
Yeah.
like, but then I was
Yeah.
on another podcast where it was something he needed. That whole thing was just set up for me to tell him something, and I struggled with it as I was sitting there. I struggled, and I think when I was on your podcast, I told that particular story, and I was like, God, do I say something? This is this man's show. How am I going to
Yeah.
tell him?
Yeah.
How am I going to tell him? This is the show. How am I going to tell him?
Right.
And I struggled a little bit, but I was like, I'm going to be obedient, because obedience is better than sacrifice. Listen, I want all God has for me. I ain't trying to make no
Right.
waves or nothing. And I told him, and he was so taken. He was like, oh my goodness. And I was obedient. But I just love having you on the show. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you
So
for having me.
tell us where we can find all your stuff, and your
Yeah.
book, about the podcast, that
Yeah.
people can tune in, and you could go and find the episode that I was on if you
Yes,
haven't listened
yeah,
to
that
it
was
yet.
recent. Yeah, yeah. So you can find you can find it anywhere, Neena Perez. So NeenaPerez, Neena Perez. And that's my website. All my social media handles are the same. And then Straight Talk No Sugar Added, it's its podcast. So Straight Talk No Sugar Added, or just look up Neena Perez and you'll find me. Very easy.
Perfect. So I will make sure I have all the information and put it into the show notes, so you can just go and you can click and you'll be able to find her. I'm telling you, you need to listen to her podcast. She is so inspirational. And I'm telling you, it's one of those things where after you finish listening to the episode, you're like, wow. Because sometimes you listen to stuff and you're like, I just wasted 30 minutes of my
Yeah.
life and I cannot get it back. But then there's some things you was like, oh my God, I need to listen again, so I can
Right.
get it's like a good book. And you have to listen
Yeah.
to it again because I missed some things because I was either laughing or I was in thought. And you have to go. So her podcast is one of those things where you have to listen to it again, or it's one of those things you just can't put down. So please
Thank
go out
you.
and support her. I'm telling you, that is my twin. I'm serious. I told you all. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for sharing your light
So
and your
grateful.
story, for being so open and honest with us. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, Miss V, thank you. This was awesome. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
All right.